The Shadow Legion story. Wait until you hear this crazy story. A 68-year-old grandma was just fixing her broken van when suddenly the most important general in America saluted her. But here's the wild part. Nobody believed she was even a real soldier. This is the incredible true story of how one tattoo changed everything. Colonel Jackson, it's such an honor to meet you. I've been reading about your team since I was just a young officer. I'm not sure I deserve such kind words. General was just fixing her van when a general saw her tattoo and saluted her. Colonel Evelyn Jackson thought nobody would ever remember her. Her amazing military service had been hidden and covered up for decades. All she had was an old tattoo and her strong pride. She had to face military police, who treated her like she was dangerous. But when the top general in the whole U.S. Army saw that ink on her old arm, everything changed completely. What happened next showed a secret conspiracy that had been going on for 50 years. It proved that some truths just refused to stay hidden forever. The hot Georgia sun was beating down really hard on the road outside Fort Benning's main gate. The air was so hot it looked like it was shimmering and dancing. Colonel Evelyn Jackson was retired now, and she was kneeling next to her broken van. At 68 years old, she still moved very carefully and precisely. After 40 years wearing a military uniform, her body still remembered how to move like a soldier. Her old weathered hands worked the wrench like she'd done it a million times before. Her dark skin was shiny with sweat, and her silver hair was pulled back in the same tight bunch she'd worn since she first joined the Army in 1975. The van was basically a piece of junk held together by willpower and hope, but it was hers, and more importantly, it was her only way to get to the Vietnam Memorial ceremony happening inside the base. This ceremony was supposed to honor military units that, according to official records, never even existed. Evelyn's jaw got tight when she remembered the phone call from 3 weeks ago. "Ma'am, we don't have any record of a Shadow Legion unit," the young clerk had said. His voice was polite but dismissive. Different designation? As if she could ever forget the unit that had been her whole life. The brothers and sisters who had bled and died in jungles. Their names were still top secret. As if the tattoo on her left arm, a shadow of an eagle held in skeleton fingers, was just some random artwork. Instead of a badge of honor she'd earned in hell, the sound of boots walking toward her made her look up. 2 military police officers were standing over her. Their faces looked stern under their caps, and their hands were resting casually on their weapons. The younger one looked barely old enough to shave. He stepped forward with the cocky attitude of someone drunk on power. "Ma'am, you need to move along. This is a restricted area." Evelyn slowly stood up, her 6-foot-tall body unfolded with quiet dignity. "I'm here for the memorial service. I have every right to be here, not without proper ID and permission," the older military police officer said. His tone suggested this conversation was already over. "Veterans need to register ahead of time." "I did register," Evelyn said, pulling out a wrinkled form from her pocket. 3 weeks ago. Colonel Evelyn Jackson, Shadow Legion, 1975 to 1995. The military police officers looked at each other. The younger one actually smirked. "Lady, there's no such thing as Shadow Legion. You trying to run some kind of scam?" The words hit her like someone had punched her in the gut. But Evelyn had been fighting this same battle for decades. Every VA appointment, every benefits claim, every attempt to honor her fallen friends, they all got the same response. No records, no unit, no proof she'd ever served her country with honor. But she had proof. It was carved into her skin, burned into her memory, and written in the scars that covered her body like a map of secret missions. "Step away from the vehicle, ma'am," the younger MP ordered. His hand moved closer to his gun. "We need to search your van for illegal stuff." Evelyn's eyes flashed with a fire that had once scared enemy fighters on 3 different continents. "Illegal stuff. Son, the only thing dangerous in that van is the truth. And apparently, that's what you're most afraid of." A small crowd had started to gather. Other veterans were arriving for the ceremony. Base workers were heading to lunch. Curious people were drawn by all the commotion. Evelyn could feel them staring at her. She could hear the whispered conversations. "Crazy old woman, probably homeless. Why won't she just leave?" The older MP, Sergeant Mills, according to his name tag, pulled out his radio. "Base security, we have a situation at the main gate. Possible trespasser claiming fake military credentials." Fake credentials. Evelyn's voice carried the authority of someone who'd once commanded respect from generals and presidents. She rolled up her left sleeve, showing the detailed tattoo that covered her whole forearm. "You want to tell me this is fake?" The shadow eagle seemed to move in the shifting light. Its skeleton claws were wrapped around a banner that read Legio, Latin for Shadow Legion. Underneath it were a bunch of small symbols that looked like random marks to most people. But 2 trained eyes. They told a story of secret operations spanning 20 years. Sergeant Mills squinted at the tattoo. His expression shifted from dismissive to uncertain. "Ma'am, anyone can get a tattoo. That doesn't prove anything." "Cambodia? 1978, Evelyn interrupted, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. "Operation Nightfall. Your precious Pentagon still has that classified, don't they?" "Laos, 1982, Operation Ghost Dance. Nicaragua, 1985. Operation Silent Thunder. With each operation name, the sergeant's face got paler and paler. These weren't random words. They were real missions, real code names, that should have been buried so deep that only a handful of people in the world knew them. How do you, Mills began, but Evelyn wasn't finished. I know because I was there. Sergeant, I was there when we pulled Senator Morrison's son out of that Cambodian prison camp. I was there when we stopped the weapons shipment that would have messed up half of Central America. I was there when good soldiers died for missions that officially never happened. The crowd had grown bigger, and Evelyn could see recognition dawning on some faces. Older veterans who remembered whispered stories, rumors of ghost units that operated in the shadows while regular forces got the glory and the history books. A black sedan pulled up to the gate. Its government license plates and dark windows screamed official business. Evelyn's heart sank. More bureaucrats, more denials, more erasing of everything she and her unit had sacrificed. But when the back door opened, the man who stepped out wore 4 stars on his shoulders. He carried himself like someone who'd earned every piece of metal on his chest. General Marcus Thompson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, looked around the scene with sharp eyes that missed nothing. His gaze fell on Evelyn, traveled down to her exposed tattoo, and stopped for a long moment. The most powerful military officer in America stared at the ink on an old woman's arm. His expression went through confusion, recognition, and something that looked like pure amazement. Then, to the shock of everyone there, General Thompson came to attention and gave a perfect salute. "Colonel Jackson," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent crowd. "It's an honor to finally meet you, ma'am. I've been reading about your unit for 30 years, wondering if any of you were still alive." The MPs looked like they'd been struck by lightning. The crowd murmured in amazement, and Evelyn Jackson, for the first time in decades, felt the weight of official recognition settle on her shoulders like the uniform she'd never stopped wearing in her heart. General Thompson's salute seemed to freeze time itself. The MPs stood there with their mouths hanging open, their authority evaporating like morning mist. The gathering crowd pressed closer, phones appearing to capture this unbelievable moment. Evelyn, despite decades of fighting for recognition, felt tears threaten to break through her iron composure. "At ease, General," she said softly, returning his salute with the precision of muscle memory. "Though I appreciate the gesture, I'm not sure my service record supports such honors anymore." Thompson lowered his hand but kept his respectful posture. "Colonel, your service record may have been buried, but it was never destroyed. Some of us have been guardians of that history, waiting for the right moment to bring it to light." He turned to the bewildered MPs. "Sergeant Mills, you and your partner will escort Colonel Jackson to my office immediately, and I suggest you treat her with the respect due a decorated war hero." "Sir, but our protocols ... double quotes Mills began. "Your protocols just changed," Thompson said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "This woman has more combat decorations than most generals. She's earned the right to walk through any gate on any base in this country." As they walked toward the base, Thompson explained what Evelyn had never dared hope to hear. In 1995, when the Cold War officially ended, a small group of senior officers began compiling the real history of covert operations. Your unit, the Shadow Legion, was at the top of that list, but the records ... double quotes Evelyn started, were classified, beyond top secret and buried in archives that officially don't exist. Thompson finished. "The racial politics of the time made it easier to erase your accomplishments than to acknowledge them. An all-black special operations unit conducting missions well integrated. Unix struggled. It didn't fit the narrative they wanted to tell. They passed through security checkpoints where guards snapped to attention upon seeing Thompson. Their eyes widened when they noticed Evelyn walking beside him as an equal. Word was spreading through the base like wildfire. The mysterious woman at the gate wasn't a fraud or a troublemaker. She was a ghost from military history, suddenly made flesh. In Thompson's office, surrounded by the trappings of power and prestige, Evelyn finally allowed herself to believe this was real. The general pulled out a thick file marked with classification, stamps that would have made most people's security clearances spontaneously combust. "Operation Nightfall," he said, opening to a page filled with her younger self's face and commendations written in language that made her sound like a superhero. "Successful extraction of high-value target from hostile territory. 0 casualties. Mission accomplished with minimal international incident." Page after page revealed the truth that had been hidden for decades. The Shadow Legion hadn't just existed, they'd been one of the most successful special operations units in military history. 12 major operations, 47 minor missions, a success rate that made Navy SEALs look like amateurs. "Why now?" Evelyn asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Why are you showing me this now?" Thompson leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking older than his years. "Because times are changing, Colonel. The military is finally ready to confront some uncomfortable truths about its past. And because," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "because we need heroes like you to help us train the next generation. I'm 68 years old, General. My fighting days are behind me. Your fighting days may be, but your teaching days could just be beginning. Over the next hour, Thompson outlined a proposal that took Evelyn's breath away. The Pentagon was establishing a new training program for Special Operations Forces, one that emphasized the psychological and strategic aspects of covert warfare. They wanted her to help design the curriculum, to share the lessons learned in jungles and deserts whose names were still classified. There's more, Thompson said, pulling out another file. We've located 7 other members of your unit who are still alive. They're scattered across the country, most of them fighting the same battles you've been fighting, trying to prove they served, trying to get the benefits they earned, trying to honor the memory of their fallen comrades. The names on the list hit Evelyn like physical blows. Marcus Ghost Williams, the sniper who could thread a needle at 800 yards. Sarah Phoenix Rodriguez, the demolitions expert who could make a bomb out of household cleaners. James Whisper Johnson, the communications specialist who spoke 7 languages and could hack any system. They're all alive, she whispered. All alive, and all invited to tomorrow's ceremony. The real ceremony, Colonel, the one where the Shadow Legion finally gets the recognition it deserves. As they talked, Thompson's aide brought in a steady stream of visitors. Reporters who'd been briefed on the story, historians eager to fill in gaps in the official record, and most importantly, other veterans who'd heard whispers of the Shadow Legion and wanted to meet the woman who'd become its living symbol. By evening, Evelyn Jackson was no longer an invisible veteran fighting for recognition. She was the center of a story that would reshape how America understood its military history, and the beginning of a reckoning that was 50 years overdue. The euphoria of recognition lasted exactly 18 hours. Evelyn woke in the base guest quarters to find General Thompson pacing outside her door, his face grim with the kind of expression that preceded bad news. "Colonel, we have a problem," he said without preamble. "Someone leaked the story to the press before we were ready. The Pentagon is in full damage control mode, and there are forces trying to shut this down before it goes any further." The morning news was brutal. Conservative pundits questioned the timing, suggesting the Shadow Legion story was manufactured to support woke military policies. Liberal commentators accused the Pentagon of a decades-long cover-up motivated by racism. Social media exploded with conspiracy theories, death threats, and demands for investigations. But the worst blow came from an unexpected source. Colonel William Hartwell, retired, former commanding officer of the 75th Ranger Regiment, in a live television interview, systematically dismantled Evelyn's credibility with the precision of a military prosecutor. "I served in Vietnam during the same period," Hartwell said, his silver hair and chest full of ribbons, lending weight to his words. "I knew every special operations unit in theater. There was no Shadow Legion. This woman is either delusional or running an elaborate fraud." The interviewer pressed him, but General Thompson confirmed her service record. "General Thompson is a good soldier, but he's been misled by fabricated documents. The real tragedy here is that legitimate veterans are being dishonored by this fantasy." Evelyn watched the interview in Thompson's office, feeling decades of progress crumble in real time. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, relatives she hadn't spoken to in years, and veterans organizations demanding explanations. "He's lying," she said quietly. "Hartwell knows exactly who we were. His unit provided cover for 3 of our operations." Thompson nodded grimly. "I know, but he's not the only one. We're getting pushback from multiple sources. People who were there, who know the truth, but are choosing to deny it." The reason became clear when Thompson's aide brought in a classified briefing that made Evelyn's blood run cold. The Shadow Legion hadn't just been erased from history. They'd been actively discredited by a network of officers who'd built their careers on taking credit for the unit's accomplishments. Operation Nightfall, the mission that had made Evelyn's reputation, was officially credited to Hartwell's Rangers. Operation Ghost Dance was now a CIA operation with no military involvement. Operation Silent Thunder never happened at all, according to the official record. They didn't just bury us, Evelyn realized. They stole our victories and gave them to white units. The conspiracy ran deeper than simple racism. Several of the officers now denying the Shadow Legion's existence had received promotions, decorations, and lucrative post-retirement positions based on missions they'd never actually conducted. Admitting the truth would destroy careers, invalidate awards, and potentially result in criminal charges for fraud. By noon, the Pentagon had issued a statement distancing itself from Thompson's earlier comments. General Thompson spoke prematurely about ongoing historical research. The Department of Defense cannot confirm the existence of any unit designated as Shadow Legion. Thompson was summoned to an emergency meeting with the Secretary of Defense. When he returned, his face was ashen. "They're transferring me to a desk job at the Pentagon, effective immediately, and they're canceling tomorrow's ceremony." "What about the other survivors?" Evelyn asked. 3 of them have already been contacted by military investigators. They're being told that any claims about Shadow Legion service could result in charges of stolen valor. The others, Thompson shrugged helplessly. "They're scared, Colonel. 50 years of being ignored, and now they're being threatened with prosecution. That evening, alone in her guest quarters, Evelyn stared at her tattoo in the bathroom mirror. The shadow eagle seemed to mock her, a permanent reminder of service that the world refused to acknowledge. She thought about the easy path, accepting the Pentagon's offer of a quiet retirement with full benefits in exchange for her silence. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she hadn't seen in 15 years. Marcus Williams, her old teammate, calling from Detroit. Evie. His voice was older, rougher, but unmistakably ghost. I saw the news. They're trying to destroy us again, aren't they? Yeah, Marcus, they are. Well, hell. Guess it's time for one last mission. What are you thinking? I'm thinking 7 old soldiers with nothing left to lose might be exactly what this country needs right now. You still got that evidence we buried in '95? Evelyn smiled for the first time in 24 hours. Every last piece of it. Then let's remind them why they called us the Shadow Legion. Within 48 hours, the surviving members of Shadow Legion began converging on Atlanta like ghosts, materializing from the mist. They came quietly, using skills honed in decades of covert operations, avoiding the media circus that had erupted around Evelyn's story. Marcus Ghost Williams arrived first, his 70-year-old frame still carrying the lean muscle of a professional soldier. Sarah Phoenix Rodriguez flew in from New Mexico, her engineer's mind already calculating angles of attack. James Whisper Johnson drove down from D.C., where he'd spent 30 years as a government translator, his security clearance intact and his memory perfect. They met in a rented warehouse on the outskirts of Atlanta, the same kind of anonymous space they'd used for mission planning half a century ago. The reunion was emotional but brief. These were people who'd learned to compartmentalize feelings in favor of objectives. Show us what you've got, Evie, Marcus said, settling into a folding chair with the patience of someone who'd spent weeks in jungle hides. Evelyn opened a waterproof case she'd kept hidden for 28 years. Inside were photographs, documents, and physical evidence from their operations, insurance she'd gathered in case this day ever came. Mission reports in her own handwriting, photos of the team in the field, medals, and Jesus, Sarah whispered, examining a photo of herself defusing a bomb in Cambodia. I thought all of this was destroyed. Most of it was, Evelyn replied, but I kept copies. Call it paranoia or preparation. Either way, we've got proof. James pulled out a laptop and began scanning documents with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades handling classified material. This is good, but it's not enough. We need corroboration, official sources, people willing to go on record. I might have something, said a voice from the warehouse entrance. They spun as one, hands moving to weapons that weren't there, before recognizing General Thompson walking toward them with his hands visible and empty. General Evelyn said carefully, thought you were persona non grata. I am, which is why I'm here unofficially, with information that officially doesn't exist. Thompson set a briefcase on the table. Before they buried me in Pentagon paperwork, I made some copies of my own. The briefcase contained the smoking gun they needed. Communications between senior officers detailing the systematic erasure of Shadow Legion records, memos discussing how to redistribute their accomplishments to more appropriate units, budget documents showing payments to officers who agreed to keep quiet about operations they'd never actually conducted. This is conspiracy, Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. This is treason, Thompson corrected, and it goes all the way to the top. They spent the next 6 hours planning their counterattack with the same methodical precision they'd once used to plan military operations. The objective was simple: force the truth into the open in a way that couldn't be denied, buried, or explained away. Sarah, whose post-military career in cybersecurity had kept her skills sharp, would handle the digital warfare. James would coordinate. With sympathetic journalists and historians, Marcus would reach out to other veterans who might have witnessed Shadow Legion operations. Evelyn would be the public face, the living symbol of everything they were fighting for. We go public in 72 hours, Evelyn decided. Simultaneous press conferences in 5 cities, document dumps 2 major news outlets, and a full briefing to Congress. They want to bury us. Let's see them try to bury the truth when it's everywhere at once. The next 3 days were a blur of covert activity. Sarah infiltrated Pentagon databases, not to steal classified information, but to document the systematic alteration of historical records. James contacted reporters who'd been investigating military cover-ups for years, providing them with leads and sources. Marcus reached out through veterans networks, finding witnesses who'd been silenced by threats and intimidation. The breakthrough came when James discovered that Colonel Hartwell, the man who'd publicly denied their existence, had received a Silver Star for Operation Nightfall, the same mission where Evelyn had actually led the rescue operation. The citation was detailed enough to prove that Hartwell had been nowhere near the action, but had somehow received credit for its success. Got him, James said, printing out the documents. This is fraud, plain and simple. Military decorations obtained under false pretenses. On the morning of their planned revelation, Evelyn stood in front of a mirror in her hotel room, adjusting the dress uniform she hadn't worn in 28 years. The ribbons and medals told a story of service that officially didn't exist, but she wore them with pride anyway. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Pentagon systems are locked down tight, but I got everything we need. They know something's coming. Marcus called from the Veterans Center where he was holding his press conference. 30 witnesses confirmed. 3 generals, 2 senators, and a CIA director who's willing to testify. They can't deny all of us. At exactly 10 a.m. Eastern, the Shadow Legion launched their final operation. Press conferences in Atlanta, Detroit, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and New York simultaneously revealed the truth that had been buried for half a century. Documents flooded social media, witnesses came forward. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and devastating. Evelyn stood at the podium in Atlanta, looking out at a room full of reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Behind her, a screen displayed photos of her unit in action, young soldiers who'd risked everything for a country that had refused to acknowledge their sacrifice. "My name is Colonel Evelyn Jackson," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never stopped being a soldier. "For 50 years, my unit and I have been erased from history. Today, we're writing ourselves back in." The questions came fast and furious, but Evelyn was ready for all of them. She had the documents, the witnesses, and most importantly, the unshakable truth of someone who'd lived every moment of the story she was telling. By evening, the Shadow Legion was trending worldwide, and the Pentagon was scrambling to respond to a crisis that threatened to expose decades of institutional corruption. 3 months later, Evelyn Jackson stood in the Rose Garden of the White House, surrounded by the surviving members of Shadow Legion and the families of those who hadn't lived to see this day. President Martinez held a folder containing posthumous Medal of Honor, recommendations, the highest military decoration finally being awarded to soldiers who'd earned it decades ago. The Shadow Legion conducted 12 major operations and 47 classified missions between 1975 and 1995, the president announced to the assembled crowd and television cameras. Their success rate was unprecedented, their sacrifice immeasurable, and their erasure from history was a grave injustice that we correct today. The ceremony was everything Evelyn had dreamed of, and more. Each surviving member received the recognition they'd been denied, their service records officially restored, their benefits backdated to when they should have begun. More importantly, the truth was now part of the permanent record, impossible to deny or bury again. Colonel Hartwell and 6 other officers faced courts-martial for stolen valor and fraud. The Pentagon announced a comprehensive review of military records to identify other units that might have been systematically erased. A scholarship fund was established in honor of Shadow Legion members who died in service to their country. But for Evelyn, the most meaningful moment came after the ceremony, when a young black woman in army fatigues approached her with tears in her eyes. "Ma'am," the soldier said, "I'm Lieutenant Sarah Jackson, no relation, but I chose my name after reading about you. I'm graduating from Ranger School next month, and I wanted to thank you for proving that people like us belong in special operations." Evelyn looked at this young woman, confident, capable, unashamed of her strength, and saw the future that her generation had fought to make possible. "You don't need to thank me, Lieutenant, you just need to be excellent. That's the best honor you can give us." As the crowd dispersed and the cameras stopped rolling, Evelyn found herself standing alone with her tattoo exposed to the afternoon sun. The Shadow Eagle no longer felt like a burden or a secret shame. It was what it had always been, a badge of honor, a symbol of service, and proof that some truths are too powerful to stay buried forever. The Shadow Legion had completed their final mission. They'd fought their way back into history, and this time, no one could erase them.